Getting into the new laws for 2017, I've done a chart. The big thing facing California employers are these local, and state minimum wage increases that are taking place here at the beginning of 2017. So for large employers, California, so employers with 26 or more employees, California state minimum wage is going up to $10.50 an hour. And the paid sick leave requirement for California is remaining the same. Los Angeles City, we've got the minimum wage set out here that's going to be increasing July 1st. And again, these local city laws, we've got multiple deadlines where we've got January 1st for some of these requirements and then July for other requirements. So it's really tricky. Employers really need to sit down with charts like this and figure out where their employees are working and make sure that they're complying with all these local laws. And I recommend talking to an experienced employment lawyer to sit down and really chart out. That's what we do for some of our clients, chart out your locations, actually sit down with the addresses of where the stores are or where your manufacturing facilities are and chart it out and list next to each location what minimum wage applies and what paid sick leave requirements apply. And that's really the only way to do this, and to make sure that you've got it down to, for some clients it comes down to the address, the street address, to determine if you're in Los Angeles City or Los Angeles County. And there are different requirements that will kick in depending on that. Same with San Diego. This chart, I've said the minimum wage in July of 2016 obviously went into place. This chart's a little bit out of date. I didn't have the particular date in July that it was set, but that did go into place at 10:50, and what's catching a lot of San Diego City employers, and this is San Diego City, the higher minimum wage and paid sick leave. It's catching a lot of employers down there where they're just realizing that the minimum wage January 1st is going up to $11.50 per hour. So it's more than Los Angeles, it's higher than California State. It's a big increase, and then it's going to slow down, I think, once it's indexed, and the state and or cities, other cities' law, minimum wage laws will start surpassing San Diego's requirements here in the future. But it's a big jump pretty early on here for San Diego. Santa Monica likely has particular minimum wage and paid sick leave requirements. Of note there, January 1st, 2017, the paid sick leave requirements are going into place for the small and large businesses, as I have set out in the chart. We'll talk about Santa Monica a bit in the slides here too, in a little more detail. But and I listed Malibu and Pasadena, these cities that you don't hear about in the news with the higher minimum wage. Local cities are implementing it. I've got a list of some of the cities, but it's good just to look at what cities you're operating in and make sure that you're complying with any local minimum wage that might be higher than any state requirement. And again, just a quick overview, if any of these laws provide greater rights to the employee, whichever law provides the most rights to the employee is the law that applies. So if your local city or county have a higher minimum wage than the state, you have to comply with that. Same with the paid sick leave requirements. And it also raises another issue of, if you've got multiple locations throughout the state of California and then you're operating in Santa Monica or the city of Los Angeles, what paid sick leave policy are you going to distribute to employees? And I think employers should think about that carefully and consider having multiple sets of policies that, one generic policy maybe that complies with the California paid sick leave requirements in the handbook, but then distribute another paid sick leave policy to the employees that are working in San Diego City or Los Angeles City, and have the handbook set out that there might be a different local law that applies. So it gets pretty tricky, and there needs to be some thought about, the handbook, to make sure that the handbook doesn't just set out the state standard and doesn't take into account these other localities that might apply. Okay, so here's a chart listing the California state minimum wage increases. It's going up to $10.50 per hour January 1st, 2017 for large businesses. It's going to be delayed 1 year for small businesses. And the key thing with the California state minimum wage to keep in mind is that the salary requirements for exempt employees is based on the state minimum wage. So it's 2 times the equivalent of the state minimum wage requirement to qualify for an exempt employee under state law. So that means at the current $10 per hour in 2016, exempt employees must be paid annually salary of at least $41,600. And when it increases to $10.50 per hour for large employers as of January 1st next month, the exempt salary level increases to $43,680 per year. And again, it gets a little tricky because the large employer, what minimum wage is going to apply to your workforce is going to determine what this salary threshold is for exempt employees. So it gets a little tricky, and then as I'll talk about here in the next few slides about the Department of Labor, that proposed increase, which is on hold now, kind of threw another wrench into the mix. But as of right now, that's been put on hold, and these are the minimum salary thresholds employers are looking at for exempt employees here in California. And Los Angeles, here's the minimum wage increases that are set to take place next year, July. And again, we've got a bit of a tricky issue because it's not kicking in until July. Can't forget that. And I do recommend employers work with their payroll companies well in advance of these increases to make sure that they're aware of it and that they're complying. Don't sit back and assume your payroll company's going to know which are automatically going to apply the higher minimum wage. You need to be proactive about that and working with them. And also too, just because your company might be subject to these higher minimum wages on the local level, excuse me, these local minimum wages do not set that minimum salary basis threshold for the exempt analysis. That exempt analysis, how much you have to pay exempt employees, is based on the state minimum wage. So you don't have to apply the local minimum wages when you're doing that analysis. And also with these laws, these local cities are requiring notices. I think all of the cities that have implemented any minimum wage or paid sick leave requirements have all come out with notices, and they're pretty easily obtainable. If you search on the internet, you can find it. And for example, I have the link here for Los Angeles, the city notice and the county notice. And I'm seeing a requirement in a lot of these cities and local areas that require it to be translated if you've got a certain percentage of the workforce that speaks a different language other than English. I'm seeing that requirement come into place quite a bit now, and I am recommending, we've had this issue come up in some litigation recently about translation of handbooks and things. So if your workforce is speaking language other than English, I do recommend that you go ahead and get that translated, and it prevents some of these arguments that come up that the employee didn't understand what the policy was when they signed the document, things like that. The good thing about some of these notices too, some of these cities, they publish the notices in the different languages, so it's pretty easy to obtain those. And again, I've got some other links, and I'll make these slides available. If you want a copy of these, send me an email, and I can email the slides to everybody on the call, so you can click these links and download these notices. But I just wanted to post these links just to show that there's a lot of work that needs to be done to ensure that you're complying with the local requirements, putting up the notices, you're complying with the higher minimum wage potentially, and any paid sick leave requirements on the local level. And down in San Diego, October 1st of 2016, a little thing came up that caught a lot of employers unaware. When the city passed the higher minimum wage and the paid sick leave back in July of this year, they also made it a requirement for employers to post or to give written notice to employees that list these items that I have on this slide: the employer's legal name, any fictitious business names, etc. So it's important that employers have employees in the city of San Diego comply with this requirement. And on this next slide, I've got a link. There is a form that employers can use. But if you're operating in the city of San Diego, have employees in the city of San Diego, it's very easy to comply with this, but it's just another notice that employers have to provide there in San Diego that a lot of people have missed. And also the city of San Diego likewise has some minimum wage notices and earned sick leave notices that have to be posted. And just like these other cities, San Diego does have this translation requirement, and if 5% of the employees at the job site speak a language other than English, you have to post it in their primary language. So Santa Monica, we've got this increase for the paid sick leave are kicking in here January 1st of 2017. So we've got 32 hours for small businesses, that's 25 or fewer employees, and paid sick leave for 40 hours for larger businesses. So if 26 or more employees, you've got to provide the 40 hours of paid sick leave. And then it's going to again increase in January 1st of 2018, 40 hours for small businesses and 72 hours for larger businesses. I've got a list here at the bottom of this slide of some of the other cities that have higher minimum wage, and the cities designated there are the ones with paid sick leave requirements. And I do recommend that employers operating in these cities carefully work with somebody that understands those cities' requirements and draft policies that comply with those requirements. If you're operating in any of these cities that have an additional paid sick leave requirement, you can't just use the policy you had that complies with the state requirements and apply it to these cities. All these cities have very unique, different accrual rates, cap rates, use rates, a lot of different things kick in. So you need to be very careful about what policy you're distributing to any employees that are working in any of these other cities.